Ito ay nakikita namin na hindi ito Magna Carta for Seafarers, hindi ito Magna Carta for Filipino Seafarers, kundi ito ay Magna Carta ng mga ship's owner.
Posting of a bond is imposed only on the side of the employer, and the worker is required to pay only a minimal appeal fee.
I'd like to remind the good senator that during the first BICAM, after it was enrolled in Forward to Malacanang, she was a signatory for the bond to be put on that provision.
If we approve this requirement of posting a bond, decisions in favor of Filipino seafarers cannot be executed until the foreign employer has exhausted all his appeals up to the Supreme Court. This is clearly discriminatory, if not unjust, to our seafarers who, for obvious reasons, file for monetary claims because of financial distress.
Mr. President, we are in receipt of the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2221 and House Bill number 7325. This is the bill on the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers. With the permission of the body, I move to recognize the chairperson of the Senate panel, Senator Raffy Tulfo, to give us the highlights of the Conference Committee report.
Senator Tulfo is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, after the reconstitution of the Bicameral Conference Committee for the purpose of Magna Carta of Seafarers Act, or proposed Magna Carta of Seafarers Act, I have the honor to present the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2221, entitled An Act Providing for the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers, and House Bill number 7325, entitled An Act Instituting the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers. The Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of the Senate Bill number 2221 and House Bill number 7325, dated 22 May 2024, is hereby withdrawn. Consequently, the Senate and House panels conferred to reconsider and further discussed the proposed measure to come up with the best version possible that will fully protect and promote the welfare for Filipino seafarers. Mr. President, I would like to thank our fellow conferees from the Senate, Senate President Chis Escudero, Senators Amy Marcos, J.B. Ejercito, and Deputy Minority Leader Riza Ontiveros, and our House counterparts headed by Chairman of the House Committee on Overseas Workers Affairs, Representative Jude Asidre, together with Representatives Marisa Del Mar Magsino, Sandro Gonzales, Ron Salo, and Marlene Primicias Agabas as members for their collaborative effort and patience in order to come up with this bicameral report. Thus, it is my honor to report to this body, Mr. President, the following. Number one, the conferees agreed to adopt the reconsidered bill on the matter as the working draft, and we polished and adjusted the language of the bill for clarity. Two, we included a section, Section 59, to balance the interests of both seafarers and employers to ensure the continued employability of our seafarers by providing a more favorable and reasonable legal environment for employers and ship owners, and to finally address the pressing problem on ambulance chasing without compromising the interests of our seafarers and with minimal or completely no cost to them. And finally, number three, the title of the reconsidered bill was adopted. Mr. President, that being said, I would like to thank again my fellow conferees and to all my colleagues for supporting this very important measure with the earnest hope that this will soon be favorably signed into law para sa karagdagang proteksyon, benepisyo at ikabubuti ng buhay ng bawat marinong Pilipino. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I respectfully move that the joint explanation of the conference committee be inserted into the records of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator Tulfo, Majority Leader.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. President,
Senator
there was a motion, I was thinking you would
Act.
act on the motion first by the,
All right, is
to
there,
include, that's to include.
Yes.
It is just to include
Yes. Mr.
the
President.
explanation of, no, the motion is to include the explanation, no?
into the records?
Into the records lang yung motion niya.
Read into the records. So, Mr. President, I move that we approve and ratify the bicameral conference.
No, President, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
We will just act first on the
I am
motion
not
of-
gonna raise a point of order. It's just that out of respect to the distinguished sponsor, he moved that the explanation be inserted into the records.
Yes.
So I am waiting just for the
Okay, there is a motion
the
by
chair.
Senator Tulfo to insert into the records the explanation of the
The conference
the
committee.
conference committee.
Yes.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I just be allowed to give a short manifestation slash probably some questions with regard to this particular measure? I know that the good gentleman from Isabela had worked so hard for this particular bill. This is my pet bill, Mr. President, since I became a member of this August chamber. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our good colleague for sponsoring this measure. Nagpapasalamat po tayo because most if not all of our amendments were taken into consideration at nakasama dito sa BICAM report, kagaya po nung pagpapaigting sa maritime occupational safety and health standards, protection ng mga seafarers laban sa mga abuso at unfair labor practices, yung pag-align po ng Magna Carta sa Department of Migrant Workers or DMW Act, pati ho yung paglalagay ng transition at support mechanisms sa mga panahong hindi pa nakakasampa muli ng barko ang ating mga marino. However, Mr. President, and I'm sorry if I have to put this on record, Mr. President, this has been the third time, if I'm not mistaken, because twice I was a member, Mr. President, not once but twice, a member of the Bicameral Conference Committee. Ito ho ay pangatlo na, and I have to say I was surprised na although 90 to 95% of the bill ay okay po ako, nagulat lang po ako kasi alam natin na ang panukalang batas na ito ay naglalayong protektahan ang mahigit kumulang 580,000 na Filipino mariners sa iba't ibang dako ng mundo o yung mga tinatawag nating bagong bayani. Nagulat lang po ako nung pumasok po itong muli itong pagpasok ng bond. So ang tanong ko lang po, ito po ba ay galing sa Senado o sa Kamara itong idea na ito? Because I don't remember the Senate tackling this or approving this particular provision, Mr. President.
Mr. President, there are some colleagues in the lower house
So it's the lower house.
that did suggest bringing back the ban provision for the purpose of employability for our seafarers. Kasi nga po, ang nangyari, nakikita ng mga shipping companies na yung ating sistema ay medyo hindi tumutugma sa kanilang kagustuhan, kaya kumukuha sila ng mga seafarers mula sa ibang bansa, particularly sa India.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to put that on record because it did not come from this August chamber, from the senators. And I'd like to put also on record and caution a warning because somehow we are now treating differently and unfairly yung other types of workers who are not sea-based, Mr. President. So I'm just worried about it, and I just wanted to put this on record para alam po ng ating mga kababayan na ito yung concern ko. Kasi ho, I remember in my stint here as a member of the Senate, the Department of Labor and Employment, I remember, the DOJ, etc. Dito sa usapin po na ito, baka po, no, na may magdala sa Korte Suprema at sabihing unconstitutional po dahil yung equal protection of the laws. Pangalawa po, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, yung pong caution na gusto kong ibigay ay yung paggamit natin ng taxpayers' money and public funds for the payment of the bond. Medyo ano po ako dito, I'm really wanting to put this on record na very ano po ito, no? Kasi even right now, I don't see any report since I became part of this discussion, yung actuarial study on the possible amount required. Another, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, is tinitingnan ko po itong report natin, there's no limitation or criteria. So baka mamaya maging limitless po ito. So I'm just warning the implementers and to make sure that this will be discussed thoroughly in the implementing rules and regulation. Last but not the least, Mr. President, I am glad that this measure will be ratified today finally because I know this is very important. I know very well, Mr. President, that our kababayans, ang mga marino ay kailangan ito. But I'm just also concerned about the use of action fund. Mr. President, I am the principal author and sponsor of the Department of Migrant Workers Act. We have discussed thoroughly in this August chamber the importance of action fund. It is an emergency fund. I don't know why it was mentioned here that they can actually, although I'm happy that the word used here is may, and I'd like to congratulate the sponsor, but still, you know, the possibility of using an emergency fund from the DMW, gusto ko lang po i-caution yung ating DMW dito sapagkat remember, the Department of Migrant Workers, hindi lang po sea-based yan. Ito pong ating dinidiscuss is Magna Carta for Seafarers. Meron pong mga hindi seafarers sa DMW. In fact, siguro kanina po, I had a lengthy discussion with our Senate President about the possibility of coming up with we're not gonna carve it from the budget of DMW, but perhaps add or come up with an additional item for the budget of DMW that will specifically address this concern, Mr. President. And because of that, I will agree, Mr. President, that the funds being used by DMW will not be touched or be used in this particular case. Kasi band po ito eh. Hindi po ng seafarer, hindi po ng buong OFW, no? And again, taxpayers' money po ito. When you're using public funds, mag-i-invite po ito ng mga kaso, no? Dun sa mga implementing agencies. And this is just a caution, Mr. President. So, I'd like that to put on record and perhaps, Mr. President, to say the least, I have very strong reservations despite the fact that I am in supportive of the measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you,
Mr. President,
Senate President is recognized.
briefly, I confirm the statements of Senator Villanueva with respect to our discussions, and that is indeed the intent of this provision, and we will introduce amendments to the proposed budget of 2025 in order not to touch the funds of DMW that is supposed to be available for the entire sector and not only for seafarers. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you again, Senate President Escudero. Thank you, dear colleague, Senator Raffy Tulfo.
Senator Risa, you were raising your hand.
Salamat, Mr. President. Just to make of record that sumasang-ayon po ako sa diwan ng mga observations at saka tanong na hinain ng good gentleman from Bulacan. Dahil kaisa din sa kung bakit, gaya ng ipinaalam ko sa good sponsor, kung ba't hindi ako pumirma dun sa BICAM report, at bahagi na rin po nung mamayang explanation of no vote ko sa ratification. Salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Risa. The Minority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I think this measure has followed a very unusual, interesting, and strange path, Mr. President. Is it correct that this is already the third BICAM report? Third? Tama po ba?
Second.
Second lang?
Yeah.
Second lang po. Kasi,
I'm sorry, Mr. President, third. This is the
Third.
third time. Like,
yes po,
Yes.
so mayroon tayong first
Tama,
BICAM. Ang first BICAM, isa yung BICAM report, yung sponsor natin, ang head ng Senate panel, ay nagbigay ng report sa body na ito. Tama po yun, no? This is the third time. Ang first time daw, December 5, 2023. May we know what was the result of that BICAM report, December 5, 2023? Did the body approve that first BICAM report?
it was approved, Mr. President.
It was
by
approved.
the
Oh
body.
yes, Mr. President. So, may we know what happened after the approval of that first BICAM na ito? BICAM, ibig sabihin nun, nag-harmonize na si Senate at saka si House. Approved by the Senate, approved by the House, and next step would be to enroll the bill, tama ba? And then submit to the Office of the President. Did that happen, Mr. President?
Yes, it happened, but I think the President did not sign it.
Okay, the President did not sign it. Did the President veto it?
No.
No.
The President did
Okay,
not.
so don't we start counting the 30 days?
No. Anong nangyari? Ano?
I think it was withdrawn.
It was withdrawn.
Mr. President?
It was withdrawn through a concurrent resolution.
So may we just know the legislative history kasi
Basahin na lang natin.
the strange path nga can also be a reason to sway where we will vote, Mr. President. Kasi sa pagboto mo, you can use substantive arguments, you can also use procedural arguments, Mr. President.
Okay, on February 27 of this year, upon the adoption of concurrent resolution number 17, recalling from the office of the President the enrolled copies of Senate Bill number 2221 and House Bill number 7325, the Senate reconstituted the bicameral conference committee designating Senators Tulfo, Villanueva, Escudero, Marcos, Pimentel III, and Hontiveros as its conferees on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2221 and House Bill number 7325. And on May 22, 2024, the House of Representatives designated Congressman Asidre, Vice Representative Salo as conferee to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2221 and House Bill 7325 on May 14, 2024. And on same date, the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2221.
May ano na po yan? May 22?
May 22,
May 22, opo.
2024. Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2221 and House Bill 7325 submitted to the Senate, recommending that Senate Bill 2221 in consolidation with House Bill 7325 be approved in accordance with the attached copy of the bill as reconciled and approved by the conferees. And on the same date, a sponsorship speech of Senator Raffy Tulfo on the Conference Committee report. And on the same date again, the Conference Committee report was approved by the Senate. And the next day, the Conference Committee report approved by the House of Representatives on May 22, 24. And on July 29, 2024, shall I continue?
Mr. President, sige. Mr. President, para lang maklaro kasi step by step po tayo. Nung nag-first BICAM tayo, December 5, 2023, approved na natin but submitted to the President ng enrolled bill. What did the Senate do? We sent communication to the Office of the President that we were withdrawing the submitted enrolled bill. Tama
Yes,
po ba yan?
upon
Okay,
the-
so that's the part of the history. Pinalik po
Yeah, upon
natin.
the adoption of
Apa.
Senate
Because,
concurrent
and because of that, binawi natin, we reconstituted another bicameral conference.
Yes,
Okay.
you're correct.
Correct. And then nagsucceed na naman yung bicameral conference. Kasi noong May 22, 2024, nag-report po ba ulit ang ating chairman ng Senate panel sa body natin? Tama po ba? Nag-report po siya. Bicameral Conference Committee report on May
Yes.
22. What did the Senate do? Did we approve the report? Yes, we did. Oh,
Yes, we
then
did.
what did we do? Did we enroll again the bill and submit it to the office of the president?
No.
We did not submit according to,
Okay. So what happened? So what did we do? Okay. So what did we do? When we approved the second BICAM report, what did we do? Did we reconsider our approval of the BICAM report?
Yes, July 29.
yes, on July 29, 2024, the Senate reconsidered the ratification of the committee, of the conference committee report filed on May 22, 2024, and reconstituted the bicameral conference committee, designating again Senators Tulfo,
Yes.
Escudero, Ejercito, Marcos, and Hontiveros as its conferees on the disagreeing provisions of.
So ito na yon. This
Yes.
is now the third time that our chairman of the Senate panel is reporting on this particular measure. So this measure has really followed this is not a usual procedure. This is a very unusual
This is
and
quite
strange procedure, Mr. President. Sa una may enrolled bill, enrolled bill, hinabol pa natin, pakibalik.
May balik.
Then sunod, pinasa natin and then reconsider natin. And then pangatlo. And may we know what could have been the serious concern, Mr. President? Maybe you know from the chairman. What has,
Mr. President.
what has been the serious concern which caused all of this strange and unusual path that this measure has followed, Mr. President?
Mr.
With all due
President.
respect, Senate President.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our distinguished minority floor leader, when this representation became this chamber's Senate President, I precisely and represented the chamber among other members in the LEDAC. I precisely brought this matter up because this is not the first time insofar as this bill is concerned that a bill has been ratified in BICAM by both chambers, not only by the Senate,
Harmonized.
and then reconsidered and then reconstituted. In fact, we noticed and we saw only a couple of days ago the veto message of the President with respect to the PNP reform bill. What I said at LEDAC, Mr. President, Your Honor, unfortunately, the minority leader was indisposed at that time, was this. I told the President and everybody there that any bill that is vetoed is the best evidence that either the PLLO is not doing its job or there is no clear coordination between the Senate, the House, and the Executive. Because I've been in Congress, Mr. President, for 9 years, in the Senate for 14 years. Quite frankly, I rarely see a bill being vetoed by any sitting president. Rarely, if at all. Because a bill will not even be voted upon, supposedly, and reach third reading even, not even BICAM, unless concerns and input suggestions from the executive are put in place. So if Congress does not want these suggestions, then we will not approve it. If we do, then Congress will approve it and send it to the President. If the President intimates that he doesn't want a particular bill, Congress can still go ahead and pass it and let it be vetoed, fine, but that rarely occurs. But Mr. President, it's a waste of energy, quite frankly, for us to keep on passing bills that the President will veto anyway. Hence, I brought up at LEDAC, and I asked for an increased coordination between the Executive and Congress, on the other hand, namely the House and the Senate, to avoid these occurrences. Since we resumed, Mr. President, and it's only been 1 week, wala pa naman tayong ginagawang gano'n na BICAM pa uli. And LEDAC was done during the recess, and hopefully, we would be able to avoid those circumstances because mechanisms have been put in place for an increased role of the PLLO insofar as making known the positions not only of the executive department but of the palace itself on certain outputs of both the House and the Senate to precisely avoid this situation happening again in the future, or worst off, measures being vetoed by the President and putting for naught the efforts poured in, the time poured in by members of both the Senate and the House. I hope
Thank you. Yes.
that satisfies
Thank you
our
for
good
the additional
minority floor
information
leaders.
from the Senate President.
I
But
think
Mr.
there are some senators who propose that a representative from the PLLO must be present during our session. And I don't see any representative from the office of the PLLO.
Mr. President, if I may, it's not only the presence of the PLLO, but actually the command and baton of the PLLO. Because, as you very well know, Mr. Presiding Officer, Mr. President, the MUP bill, the position of the various departments differ and oppose each other. These have to be reconciled and consolidated by the PLLO. Because that puts us in an awkward and difficult position. So we have set up a mechanism, Mr. President, with the PLLO, and hopefully we will be able to avoid these occurrences in the future. And I hope even what happened to the bill of Senator De La Rosa on the PNP reform bill will be avoided as well. But we also tried to remedy the same.
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir
Hindi ko lang
President.
kakalimutan yung tao.
Senator De La Rosa is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I just want to put it on record that the deliberation of that PNP organizational reform bill from day one hanggang natapos yun, andyan ang PLLO, sige, follow up sa akin. Yung DILG, Napolcom at PNP, sila lahat ay nagtutulong-tulungan para matapos yun. Sila po ay hanggang BICAM, kahit sa BICAM, Mr. President, andoon sila. Supposed to be, wala na sa BICAM dahil that is a matter between the two houses lang eh. Pero andoon sila. They were monitoring everything. And I wonder why, bakit nila binito? Well, hindi na natin sila ma-question dyan. Pero sana, huwag ipot ang blame dito sa atin sa Congress kung ganun ang mangyayari. Dahil we have accommodated everything. Everything that they want to be included in the provisions of the said measure, andun lahat. Kasama lahat. Ang PLLO, sige follow up sa akin. Andito ba ang PLLO?
Nandiyan na, dumating na.
Oh, sige follow up sa akin every day. Sir, kailan natin? Kasi worried na yung Napolcom na ang DILG na problema nila hindi ma-address dahil wala yung bill mo. So, pinapalo po natin. So sana, I don't know. I don't know how to do this. Basta, as far as we are concerned, we did our best, Mr. President.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator
you.
De La Rosa.
So, Mr. President, if I may continue.
Yes,
kasi
Minority
off
Leader.
topic po tayo, Mr. President. Anyway, yung veto power, don't be so concerned about that kasi recognized constitutional power naman yan ng Presidente. That's part of the entire process. And we have also a remedy, actually. Nasa Constitution din. There's a remedy. Yeah, we can override the veto. But balik lang po tayo dito sa particular measure na ito. From the chairman, can we get, kasi sa lawak ng experience niya sa BICAM, may we get what is that serious subject matter which has caused this measure its very strange legislative course? May we know? Ano pa ba na yan? Pag magbabay-cam report ka rito, harmonized na eh. Harmonized. Naka-quotation marks eh. Harmonized, then binabawi. Harmonized, then binawi. What is that? What is the serious
What
concern,
happened,
Mr.
Mr. President, when it was sent to Malacanang and it was due for signing by the President, and there was a complaint from some sectors or group stating that the domestic shipping companies must not be included in the international shipping simply because it's more expensive, mas mahal. So siguro hindi lang naintindihan ni Presidente yung wordings doon dahil yung domestic shipping companies ay hindi under sa DMW kundi under sa DOLE. So when we did clarify that and put it in writing at binago namin yung pagsulat sa provision at binalik namin sa Malacanang. And then there was this request that the bond should be included again. Because on the first place, when we first sent it to the executive, there was the bond provision wasn't included.
Kaya nga, yes, okay. Yes, so hindi. Ang lumalabas, Mr. President, kung meron palang sektor, or let's say, or the branch, the executive branch, meron pala silang observations or objections sa bill natin, piecemeal nilang sinasabi sa atin. Hindi pa siya at one time sinabi na sana lahat. Isa-isa lang sinasabi. Pag ma-address mo na yung isa, pagbalik, ay meron pa pala, isa pa. Ganun po ang nangyayari rito. Kaya nakakatatlong bycam tayo.
I would like to recognize the Senate President, Mr. President.
Mr. President, to be fair,
Senate President, recognized.
the first BICAM, and the good chairman can refresh my memory if I'm mistaken. The first BICAM report included
Yes, the bond
the
was
provision on
included.
bond.
Yes,
A different concern was raised, nothing to do with the bond.
correct.
And then it was reconsidered and the BICAM reconstituted. The second report submitted, although it should not have touched on it anymore, touched on the bond and removed the bond. So the third time it was returned. So the first time, the third time, Mr. President, that was when the concern was brought out again, because in the first one it was not brought up because it was there. On the second, when it was returned, it all of a sudden disappeared. That's the reason for the third.
That is correct, Mr.
So
President.
it's not that they're
Yes,
giving
yes,
it piecemeal. But again, Mr. President, I reiterate, we have a new procedure in place, and hopefully the good gentleman will be at my back if this happens again, and I hopefully will not be able to answer him on these points anymore in the future, hopefully,
Yes.
Mr. President, Your Honor.
So lumalabas nga, Mr. President, that the bond is a big deal to some sectors of society, siguro. Big enough a deal so that our second BICAM report was requested no longer to be enrolled. Tama, not enrolled, but the motion for reconsideration was made at the level of the houses of Congress. Ganun ang nangyari. So at least I think that has been clarified, Mr. President. So that will guide us in our vote on this bicameral conference committee report, Mr. President. So maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And again, Mr. President,
Senator
just to
Villanueva.
reiterate, Mr. President, my earlier pronouncement, that it did not come from this August chamber. This institution did not introduce or tayo yung nagbalik nung band. So I just want to put that on record because I have not heard of anyone in this August chamber lobbying or pursuing that provision, that particular provision. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Risa, you have a manifestation.
I move to recognize Senator Ontiveros.
The Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Ontiveros, recognized.
Salamat, Mr. President. Just for the record, muli po akong tumatayo sa inyong harapan at tulad sa maraming beses, patuloy akong maninindigan para tutulan ang paglalagay ng probisyon sa Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers patungkol sa bond. I am dismayed by the fact that the bicameral conference was reconvened to return the controversial provision that will mandate the payment of a bond before the monetary benefits arising from disability are released. Dahil sa paurong sulong sa BICAM, binigyan lang natin ang ating mga seafarers ng hindi patas na laban dahil sa napakaraming paglabag sa polisiya at batas, hindi lamang sa ating konstitusyon, kundi pati na rin sa Philippine Labor Code, Maritime Labor Convention of 2006, also known as the Seafarers Bill of Rights, and the fourth pillar of international maritime law. Firstly, under the Labor Code, the posting of a bond is imposed only on the side of the employer, and the worker is required to pay only a minimal appeal fee. Also, Mr. President, under the NLRC Rules of Procedure, Section 14 and Section 6 on bond, quote, when appealing a case, it is only the employer who is forced to post a bond, close quote. Quote, in case the decision of the labor arbiter or the regional director involves a monetary award, an appeal by the employer may be perfected only upon posting of a bond, which shall either be in the form of cash deposit or surety bond, equivalent in amount to the monetary award, exclusive of damages and attorney's fees, close quote. The bond requirement is an exemption to the general rule that the decision of the NLRC is immediately executory. Sumunod, Mr. President, on the issue of constitutionality, also mentioned by the good gentleman from Bulacan, it violates the constitutional guarantee on equal protection, which means that all persons or things similarly situated should be treated alike, both as to rights conferred and responsibility imposed. The posting of a bond singles out seafarer claims from other labor claims, both local and overseas. Masyado namang naagrabyado ang mga seafarers dito. They will be penalized by the bond that also downplays their rights guaranteed in the Constitution instead of protecting their rights and promoting their welfare. To reiterate and to clarify my position on ambulance chasing na siyang ginagamit na dahilan para sa bond, I am against ambulance chasing. We are against it and any form of abuse of our existing laws, and with the end in view of fair and speedy justice for all. We all want better jobs and opportunities for our OFWs. But let us not allow the provision on the posting of a bond to be the reason to curtail the true essence of the law. Another important point I would like to emphasize, patungkol sa Akson Fund, also mentioned by the good gentleman from Bulacan, na maaaring gamitin para sa pagpondo ng bond. Ang Akson Fund ay nabuo sa ilalim ng BMW para tulungan ang mga OFWs. In fact, the DBM allocated an amount of 1.2 billion pesos for the Agarang Kalinga at Saklolo para sa mga OFW na nangangailangan o Akson Fund, which provides legal, medical, financial, and other forms of assistance to OFWs, including repatriation, shipment of remains, evacuation, rescue, and any other analogous help or intervention to protect the rights of Filipino nationals. Tama po ba na binibigyan natin ng pahintulot na gamitin ang pondo ng gobyerno para tulungan ang mga ship owners and manning agencies by the posting of a bond? As far as I know, it is not right to use government fund to reimburse private corporations, and no public funds can be used for a private purpose. Bakit biglang naipasok ang Akson Fund para lang ma-justify ang bond? Mr. President, any disbursement of funds will require the allocation of a budget by Congress. Isa pa pong tanong, Mr. President, meron po bang naisagawang pag-aaral on the amount of premiums? Itinanong din ng good gentleman from Bulacan. Tila mas maraming nabuksang problema ito kaysa bigyang solusyon ang mahalagang problema sa maritime industry. Ang Magna Carta ay dapat palawakin, pagandahin, at hindi para limitahan ang mga karapatan ng mga seafarers. Ang Magna Carta ay para sa mga Filipino seafarers at tungkulin natin bilang mga hinalal at pinagkatiwalaan ng taong bayan para gumawa ng batas na siguraduhin na kasama nila tayo. We are called upon to heed our time-honored duty to protect labor rights. Lastly, Mr. President, allow me to quote the phrase by the late Philippine President Ramon Magsaysay, as far as the constitutional obligation of social justice is concerned. Quote, "He who has less in life should have more in law." Close quote. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Senator Tiveros.
Mr. President,
Senator
thank you
Tulfo
for
may respond.
that statement. Honorable Senator, Senate Minority Leader Rizon Tiveros. I would like to remind the good senator that during the first BICAM, after it was enrolled and forwarded to Malacanang, she was a signatory for the ban to be put on that provision. You did agree? Yes. During the first BICAM, the ban was there, and you were a signatory to it.
Yeah, you want to respond, Senator Tiveros?
During the first BICAM. No, yes. But during the first BICAM, everybody agreed that the ban is going to be there, and there's a provision for the ban. And he did sign that BICAM. And now she's objecting to it, Mr. President.
Senator Risa may respond.
Salamat, Mr. President. Salamat, good sponsor. Without benefit of checking whether or not I signed the BICAM report, pero alam din naman po ng good sponsor dahil bawat kilos at boto at manifestation ko tungkol dito sa ating Magna Carta ay ipinapaalam ko muna sa kanila bago ko ginagawa. Unang BICAM pa lang, nag-argue na ako laban sa bond at magkasama kami ng good sponsor doon. And nung unang, kung tama yung recollection nila, and without benefit, Mr. President, of me checking whether I signed the BICAM report, if I signed the first BICAM report, kahit nandun ang bond, pero unang pagboto pa lang natin dun sa Magna Carta of Seafarer, yung unang version na yon na may bond, bumoto na po ako ng no. At nagpaalam ako sa good sponsor, good chair, tungkol doon. Ngayon, sa pangatlong proseso natin ng BICAM na ibinalik yung bond, di po katulad nung second BICAM, natanggal po namin ng good sponsor. Ay, wala akong salamin. Pakibasa po sa akin, ano po ito? Ano pong nakasulat? I apologize, Mr. President. Hindi ko Salamat, good minority leader. Hindi ko, pasensya po, Mr. President, hindi ko po nadala yung salamin ko dito kaya hindi ko nabasa. Okay po. So, I confirmed what the good sponsor has said na yung unang BICAM report na mayroong bond, pumirma ako na may notation with reservation on the bond. At gaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, pagkatapos kong ipaalam muna sa good sponsor, kaya bumoto ako ng no dun sa unang BICAM report na may bond. Yung pangalawang BICAM report na pinagtulungan namin ng good sponsor na walang bond, nakaboto po ako ng yes. At maalala ko po kung ganong kasaya yung mga kasama nating marino na nandirito sa gallery, nasaksihan nila ang pag-sponsor ng good sponsor ng pangalawang BICAM na yon na walang bond, at inalayan pa ang good sponsor ng Bulaklak at nagdiwang sa pag-ratify nung pangalawang BICAM report na iyon na walang bond. Ngayon, umabot po tayo sa pangatlong BICAM, may bond po ulit, kaya't nagpaalam po ako ulit sa good sponsor na Sorry po, Chair, hindi na po ako makakapirma sa BICAM report at ako po'y boboto muli tulad nung unang beses ng no. So just for the record, Mr. President, at para ng may buong paggalang, mai-clarify ko po yung point made by the good sponsor. Salamat po, Mr.
Thank
President.
you, Senator Tiveros. Your manifestations
Thank you,
are well
Mr.
noted.
President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President,
Yes,
Yes, Mr.
Mr. President, move to recognize Minority Floor Leader Pimentel.
To make good use of the time, Mr. President, because when we will vote on the bicameral conference committee report, the minority will be requesting or requiring physical presence of a quorum on the floor. So as we await our other colleagues, if I can just maybe give the explanation on how I will vote on this measure, Mr. President. So I think I will be voting no. I'm constrained to vote no to the ratification of this bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2221 and House Bill number 7325, entitled An Act Providing for the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers, for the following reasons. Number one, I have serious misgivings about the procedure taken in reaching this report, where the bicameral conference was conducted and terminated 3 times already, resulting in basically 3 different reports. This should not be a precedent. On the substance, I cannot agree to the insertion of a new Section 59, execution of judgment and monetary awards. The insertion seeks to treat foreign employers of Filipino seafarers more favorably than our law treats local employers of Filipino workers. If we approve this insertion, adverse decisions against foreign employers of Filipino seafarers will no longer be immediately executory, while those against local employers of Filipino workers are. If we approve this insertion, foreign employers of Filipino seafarers will no longer need to post a bond in order to perfect appeals of adverse decisions of the labor arbiter, while local employers of Filipino workers need to post a bond to perfect an appeal. This may lead to frivolous, dilatory appeals of adverse decisions by these foreign employers of seafarers. On the other hand, the insertion also seeks to treat Filipino seafarers less favorably than other Filipino workers. Decisions in favor of Filipino workers are immediately executory, even pending appeal by the local employer. This results in immediate reinstatement in illegal dismissal cases. In the newly inserted Section 59, a bond must be posted by the seafarers before a writ of execution is issued in their favor. If we approve this requirement of posting a bond, decisions in favor of Filipino seafarers cannot be executed until the foreign employer has exhausted all his appeals up to the Supreme Court. This is clearly discriminatory, if not unjust, to our seafarers who, for obvious reasons, file for monetary claims because of financial distress. Let us all be reminded that the Magna Carta of Filipino seafarers is meant to protect the seafarers. To appease our seafarers, whoever crafted this insertion gives the seafarer a small window to be able to execute the favorable decision pending appeal if he files a supersedeas bond. The government may even assist in posting a bond. This seems like a good idea unless you have had any experience procuring a supersedeas bond. Insurance companies, aside from charging exorbitant premiums, require the applicant to give collateral, usually in the form of cash deposits at least equal to the monetary award. This appeasement, therefore, is illusory. In addition to the constitutional issues that have been also raised about the equal protection clause, as well as the use of public money to pursue or to protect private interests. So the painful truth is this bill does not give Filipino seafarers any additional rights or benefits that they do not already enjoy by way of international agreements. On the contrary, this particular insertion even takes away a benefit that they already now enjoy. So for these reasons, Mr. President, when the time comes, this representation will have to vote no to the bicameral conference committee report. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minority Leader. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to suspend session.
Session suspended for a minute.